Hey traders, it's John Fortune here of this week's Weekly Forex Forecast. We're going to start off with the US dollar index before running through over 30 markets. As we go through the markets, we're going to be highlighting ones to watch for the week ahead, so be sure to watch the video all the way through to the end. In previous videos, we've highlighted the fact that the dollar index looks to be in a fourth wave correction from bottom to top, and this correction is still intact. We had a FOMC last week, and although we had a breakout to the upside as we were looking at in last week's video, we didn't really go very far, and again, this is because this is overall a counter trend move by the looks of it. Counter trend moves tend to be choppy and corrective in nature. So not a huge amount has changed in the dollar index. We are still structured to the upside near term, but it's a corrective structure, and we are overall still looking for another leg to the downside at some point. Once we break the 90.04, as it currently stands, this would be the indication to start to look for short positions in the dollar index, and the dollar index will have rolled over in line with its overall trend, and you can see this would actually be also confirmation of this head and shoulders pattern here. So very simply put, where does this leave us going into next week? So overall, we're going to go into next week with a neutral bias on the US dollar index, and this just simply means that we're going to trade the dollar pairs on their own merit, the way they are currently structured, and we're also going to be looking outside of the dollar pairs for the better opportunities going into next week. Next, we have crude oil. Now, crude oil is structured to the downside near term, and we highlighted a pullback to the 53.25. We did bounce and pull back into this area. Anybody not involved from last week, any correction back towards this level once again would be viewed as the opportunity to start to look for short positions in this market down towards the next key of support to the downside, the target set at the 50.48. Because this is a secondary trend, the near-term trend is a secondary trend, this will not be one which we highlight for next week, so it will not be very high up on the watch list. But if you are looking to trade crude oil, I would favor short positions in this market next week. Next is euro dollar. Last week we were looking for short positions into the 1.20590, and we did take out this target to the pip last week. Euro dollar is still structured to the downside going into this week, so I would prefer short positions in this market. Just bear in mind what we said about dollar strength trades next week potentially being a bit risky with the way the dollar index is structured. However, although this is not one to watch for next week and high up on the watch list, if you are looking to trade this, this would be an area I would be interested to start to look for bearish reversals. And I'd be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside, the target set, the 1.2012. Next is pound dollar. Now, pound dollar is structured to the upside in line with its primary trend, making this one to watch for next week. We didn't really go very far last week, but any correction back down towards the 1.36340 will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market. I'm going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set, at the 1.3800. Next, we have US dollar yen. Now, US dollar yen is structured to the upside near term. This is a secondary trend, but we do have some nice momentum. So I favor long positions in this market next week. Any correction back down towards the 103.64 will be viewed as an opportunity next week to look for bullish reversals in this market. Up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set at the 105.03. And if we can get a break through here, going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2 at the 105.66. Next is Aussie dollar. Last week we were looking for short positions in this market only, and we did take out both targets to the downside in this market last week. I am still only interested in short positions in this market next week, but just bear in mind this is a secondary trend, so it doesn't go up to the top of the watch list. Any correction, once again back towards 0.77390, will be viewed as the opportunity to look for potential bearish reversals in this market, down towards the next key of support to the downside, the target set, the 0.7573, and if we can get a break through here, down towards the second target to the downside at 0.7451. Next is New Zealand dollar. Now, last week we started to reverse to the upside in this market in line with the primary trend, making this one to watch for next week. We've already pulled back and tested the 0.1180, so any deeper correction will be viewed as an opportunity next week to start to look for bullish reversals in this market. And I'm going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, and the target set at the 0.7322. Next is US dollar Swiss franc. Now, last week we started the week here and we highlighted a potential move into the 0.89190, and we came right up to this level last week. Going into this week, we are structured to the downside, so I'm only interested in short positions now in this asset. This is in line with the primary trend, in line with the overall bear market in US dollar Swiss franc, and it makes this one to watch for next week. We're currently sitting right at the 0.8910, and this therefore is an area going into next week where I'm going to be looking for potential bearish reversals in this market. And we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside, the target set at the 0.8853. And if we can get a break through here, down towards the second key of support to the downside and target 2, at the 0.8803. Next is US dollar CAD. US dollar CAD is currently structured to the upside, but this is a secondary trend. So I would still only favor long positions in this market, although it's not one to watch for next week. Any correction back down towards the 1.26470 for anybody interested in trading this pair would be viewed next week as the opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.2951. Next we have gold. Gold is currently structured to the upside. It does look to be breaking out of a potential inverse head and shoulders, although it is still fairly choppy, so this has not been highlighted as one to watch for next week, but I would only favor long positions next week in gold. We're currently pulling back to the 1839.82, so this would be an area, if you are looking to trade gold, that you can start to look for bullish reversals to the upside. And I'll be looking up to the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set in this market at the 1911.40. Next we have Euro Yen. Now Euro Yen is structured to the upside in line with the primary trend, so this goes down as one to watch for next week. We do have some nice momentum coming into this market as well, so any correction next week towards the 125960 is certainly going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals. And we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 127.96, and above and beyond that we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2 at the 129.26. Next we have franc yen. Last week we highlighted this as one to watch to the upside, and we did come up and take out the target at the 117.87 last week. Going into this week, this is once again one to watch, and any correction back towards the 116.75 will be viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 118.51. Next we have pound yen. Now last week we identified this market as one to watch, and we did take out both targets to the upside in this market last week. Once again this week this market goes down as one to watch, and any correction back towards the 141.680 is going to be viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market. And we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 144.56. Next is Aussie yen. Last week we noted that this market was in a secondary trend to the downside, and we were only interested in short positions, but it was a secondary trend. We did take out the target to the downside at the 79.52. Going into this week, however, in this market, we started to break out in the direction of the primary trend, and it makes this one to watch going into this week. Any deeper correction towards a 79.480 is going to be viewed as a potential opportunity to look for a right shoulder of this inverse head and shoulder setup in the direction of the primary trend. And any bullish reversals in this market next week will be viewed as an opportunity to look for long positions up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 80.90. And if we can get a break through here, up towards target 2 at the 81.57. Next is CAD yen. Now CAD yen is currently structured to the downside, technically speaking. We may be forming a right shoulder, but personally I don't really like this too much to the downside. It's in line with the secondary trend to the downside. The primary trend is to the upside, and we're very, very corrective. This may actually be a market to leave for next week. If we start to break above the 82.20, we can start to look for long positions in this market once again. If you absolutely wanted to trade this market, then the opportunity I'd be interested in, if we start to reverse in this area right here at the 82.020, this would be where I'd be looking for short positions as long as we're below the 82.20, and I'd be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set, and then essentially the range bottom at the 81.12. Next is New Zealand yen. Now New Zealand yen is structured to the upside in line with the primary trend, making this one to watch for next week. Any correction back down towards the 73.88 is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals. We're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 76.16. Next we have Euro franc. Now right at the end of last week we had this momentum rally to the upside, and this is back in line. We've actually reversed in line with the primary trend, making this one to watch for next week. Any correction back down towards the 1.07650 is going to be viewed as an opportunity next week to look for bullish setups in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at 1.0838. Next is Euro New Zealand. Now Euro New Zealand is structured to the downside in line with the primary trend, the bigger bear market in this asset. Therefore this makes this one to watch going into next week. We've already pulled back to the 1.7005, but any deeper correction towards this level once again next week will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals in this market down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at 1.6727. Next is EurUsd. Now last week we highlighted the 1.58280 to the upside, and we did take out this target last week in EurUsd. Going into this week, I would still only be interested in long positions in this market, despite the fact this is a secondary trend near term to the upside in EurUsd. Any correction back down towards 1.57060 would, if you are looking to trade this market, be viewed as the opportunity to look for long positions up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.6023. Next we have Euro Pound. Last week we highlighted this as one to watch to the downside, and we did take out the target to the pip last week at the 0.88150. Going into this week, this market remains one to watch, and any deeper correction towards the 0.88970 will be viewed as another opportunity to look for bearish reversals in this market down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.8726. Next we have EuroCAD. Now last week we highlighted the 1.55660 to the upside, and we did come up and take out this target last week, and that was the move in this asset last week. Going into this week, we are still structured to the upside as part of a secondary trend, so I only favour long positions in this market. Any deeper pullback towards the 1.5450 will be viewed as an opportunity to potentially look for bullish reversals in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set, the 1.5609, and if we can break through here, up towards target 2 of 1.5661. Next we have pound franc. Last week we highlighted this as one to watch, and we did trade into the 1.21990, taking out the target set from last week in this market. Going into this week, pound franc is still trending to the upside. It's getting a little bit choppy, but it is in line with the primary trend, the bigger picture, making this one to watch once again next week. Any correction back down towards the 1.21080 is simply going to be viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.2255, and if we can break through here up to target 2 at the 1.2327. Next we have pound Aussie. Now last week we took out both targets to the upside in this market at the 1.7875 and the 1.79370, and that was the move in pound Aussie for last week. Going into this week, I do still favour long positions in this market, despite the fact it's still technically in a secondary trend. Any correction, because we're quite close to the targets here, so any correction back down towards the 1.76160 would be viewed, if you're looking to trade this market, as the opportunity to start to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.7997, and as always, if we can break through here up towards target 2 at the 1.8166. Next is pound CAD. We highlighted the 1.7510 to the upside to look for a target last week in this market, and we did take out this target last week. Going into this week, we did break out in the direction of the overall primary trend in this market last week, so this goes down as one to watch for the coming week. We are quite close to the target. Any deeper correction in this market is going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.7665. Next is pound New Zealand. Now last week we highlighted this as one to watch to the upside, although we didn't really go anywhere last week, we just kind of moved sideways. Because of the way this is structured in line with the primary trend, this is where we get the higher probability moves, this is where we get the most explosive moves, so it still remains one to watch for next week. We've started to pull back towards the 1.89750, and any deep correction towards this area will be viewed as an opportunity next week to start to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.9316, and if we can break through here up towards target 2 at the 1.9615. Next is Aussie franc. Now last week we were only interested in short positions in this market. Noted this was in a secondary trend. We did take out the target to the downside at the 0.6780, and depending on your broker, we may or may not have taken out the 0.6753, because on this platform we missed it by about 0.3 pips. But again, depending on your broker and your data, you may have taken this target out. Going into this week, because on this chart we missed it by a couple of pipettes, we've left the target of the 0.6753 on there. Any deeper correction back towards the 0.68610 will be once again viewed as a potential opportunity to look for bearish reversals down towards the target set from last week at the 0.67530, and if we can break through here down towards the second key area of support to the downside and target 2, the 0.6719. Just bear in mind this hasn't been highlighted as one to watch because this is a secondary trend. It's a correction of a much bigger primary trend to the upside. Next is Aussie CAD. Now last week we highlighted the 0.97680, and we did take out this target to the downside in this market. Going into this week, it remains structured to the downside near term in a secondary trend, so I would only be interested in short positions in this market. If you are looking to trade Aussie CAD, Any correction towards the 0.98380 would be viewed as the opportunity next week to start to look for bearish reversals once again in this market, down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.9752, and a breakthrough here would see us down towards target 2 at the 0.9694. Next, we have Aussie New Zealand. Now, Aussie New Zealand is an interesting one the way it's structured because the overall primary trend is intact. So this really is technically one to watch going into next week. But you can see the primary trend is intact only by this much. If we break down below the 1.06290, this will have reversed in the near term, and this will not be one to watch next week. So assuming we do not take out the low and we start to reverse, and we'd have to see a bigger breakout, a reversal to the upside in this market. If we started to break out to the upside, this would be a market I'd be interested in looking for long positions. And I'm going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.0841. I do have a feeling though, at the start of next week, we may see this taking out the 1.06290, in which case I'll be taking this off my watch list altogether for next week. Next is New Zealand CAD. Now, New Zealand CAD is structured to the upside in line with the primary trend, the bigger picture. So this certainly goes down as one to watch next week. Any deeper correction towards the 0.90710 is going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market. And I'm going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set, at the 0.9256. Next is New Zealand franc. Now, last week we highlighted this as one to watch, and we pointed out the 0.63260 as a key area of support to look for a bounce to the upside in this market. We did rally from this area, coming close to the target, but not yet achieving it at 0.64390. The overall primary trend is intact to the upside in this market, once again making this one to watch for next week. Any correction for anybody not involved back down towards the 0.63260 from last week is going to be viewed once again as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 0.6439. If we start to break through here, you can see we have two more targets to the upside at the 0.6462 and the 0.6504. And last but not least, we have CAD franc. Now, last week we highlighted the fact this market was structured to the downside near term, and we're looking for a trade into the 0.69280. We did come down, take out this target, and that was the move in this asset from last week. This week, CAD franc still remains structured to the downside in a secondary trend, so I would only be interested in short positions in this market next week. We've started to pull back, and any deeper correction will be viewed as an opportunity to look for potential bearish reversals in this market, down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set, the 0.6880. So that is it for me for this week, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by liking, sharing and subscribing. A big thank you to everybody who does that on a regular basis, and a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to the channel so far, and also a big thank you to everybody who comments on the channel as well. I want to wish you all a nice weekend, and I want to wish you all the best in your trading next week. The only thing left to say is take care, and don't forget to trade safely.